Welcome to the garden. Today is gonna be a little bit more of a sad video. I'm gonna be discussing our 5 biggest problems that we had in the garden this year, but I'm also going to be talking about what methods we use to try to fix them or have fixed them or are still in the process of fixing. So I'm doing our 5 biggest problems, starting from the least to the worst. So if you guys want to see what is the worst problem that we dealt with this year, you'll want to watch all the way to the end. Hey, I'm Brooke and we have been gardening in Texas for years now, and I'm so excited to talk to you guys about this one today because I feel like that this is one influencers and content creators in general can sometimes miss. Talking about what problems we're dealing with in the garden is also important because it helps others realize that they're not the only ones dealing with those problems. You all see those beautiful pictures on Instagram of perfect gardens and harvests, but those people are probably dealing with problems themselves that they're just not telling you about. And as much as I love a good Instagram harvest, I also think it's important to talk about these issues. So, problem number 1, and this is the least of our biggest problems, and that is the heat. We always 100% of the time deal with heat stress in the garden. It just seems to be normal here in Texas. It always is one of the biggest problems that we deal with in the garden, but we did work this year on some coping methods to hopefully help with these issues. So some things that we did this year is I got some solar irrigation in the garden in some of the areas, which did seem to help those areas a lot. I'll put some video up here where you guys can see the plants that have solar irrigation actually look really, really nice right now. I also did shade cloths. This actually did help our lettuce and potatoes last longer this year because I put them up when it started to get hot, and our lettuce actually stayed much longer than it normally does, and our potatoes seem to do a lot better. The reason that I included heat is because I feel like it really contributed to some of our bigger problems that I'm gonna be talking about, coming up here. Because once your plants are heat stressed, they're more susceptible to other things. So I feel like the heat played a very big role in some of the things that happened with our garden this year. So the heat is just always going to be a problem, and while we can do things to proactively fight against it, it is just hot here, and some things we do have to let go. The second least biggest problem that we dealt with, so we're moving up, I feel that this one was worse than the heat, but it still wasn't some of the worst of some of our biggest problems this year, and that is the weeds. In Texas, we are dealing with so many weeds here, stuff that is extremely invasive. Johnson grass, nut grass, curly dock, Bermuda. Bermuda is very heavy where I live because this is a big ranching area. They all plant Bermuda to feed their cows. Understandable. I love Bermuda for the cows, but I don't love it in the garden. It crawls over everything. It'll even crawl up into your garden beds and over landscape fabric. So the weeds were definitely a big problem this year, and with the expansion of the garden, it just made it that much harder. And then the heat also contributed because we really had trouble getting out in the afternoon to deal with the weeds. So we really were only limited to working in the mornings and at nights because we had a heat index here, guys, of 150 some days. It's way too hot to be outside, even for young and healthy people. So we were really limited to working mornings and nights here. I feel like that we're starting to get it under control now, especially since it's starting to cool off. The weeds aren't necessarily an issue, more that the heat just sort of contributed to us not being able to keep up with the weeds. But the weeds being invasive in Texas is just a problem that you're going to deal with. What you can do and what we've done is we've added more garden beds to our garden this year. Do I feel that it helped? Definitely. I could weed eat around those garden beds, which made weeding a lot faster, and there was less weeds in the garden beds than there are in ground. I added landscape fabric to path areas in the winter when the weeds were dead, and I did see a significantly less amount of weeds. My big plants like elderberry, I didn't really focus on weeding this year, and I feel like it did make a difference because honestly, the weeds do not get nearly as tall normally as those plants. So I really just didn't focus on the elderberry, the trees, that kind of stuff, all the big stuff. I really focused on keeping my small plants weeded, and it seemed to make a huge difference. Because my elderberry can withstand having some weeds around it, where my small plants like tomatoes and cucumbers can't handle being covered in Johnson grass and Bermuda. So yeah, if you're struggling with the weeds, guys, focus on your small plants first. And I've noticed that focusing on my garden beds more than my in-ground was also better. Even though the in-ground got really, really bad, the garden beds were able to be easily kept up with. I've noticed that my garden beds really don't have that many weeds right now. Maybe some small, like little Johnson grass sprouts and stuff, but that's it. Next up, problem 3, white flies. This was the first year that I've actually dealt with white flies, I think, or dealt with them on a scale that I noticed that they were there. So this is our first year that we did eggplant. And when I planted the eggplant in spring, it started not long after I transplanted it getting attacked. I wasn't really sure by what. I sort of let it go for a while because it wasn't that bad. And a lot of times, if your plants are healthy, they can fight off pests on their own. But as we hit summer and the plant started getting heat stress, weed stress, the whiteflies got worse. So I then started treating with neem oil, which seemed to help the problem. It helped manage it, but they didn't really go away completely. It was still getting damaged. It was still dealing with the whiteflies. It honestly looked like it wasn't gonna make it. Then I got some neem and peppermint. So it's just gonna be neem oil and then added peppermint oil. I sprayed that. Now they seem to be gone. But this was a very long, drawn out issue in the garden. That bothered me for a really long time. The plant looks way better now. I haven't seen any whiteflies on it, and the new growth has no damage. I am probably still gonna give it one more treatment just to be sure. But this was a very strange issue for me personally, because we don't normally deal with this kind of stuff. And maybe it was just the eggplant, because that was all that they attacked. So maybe it's just because we've never had eggplant in the garden before. It literally attacked, I had 2 eggplants, and it attacked both of them. I'm glad that the problem is dealt with now, but this was a very long, drawn-out issue that puzzled me for a while. Problem number 4, and the next one is the worst problem that we've dealt with in the garden this year. So problem number 4 is hornworms. We normally deal with hornworms every single year. Like, it's just something that we deal with here in Texas. They are a pest to tomatoes and peppers especially. And normally some of the things that I do is I plant marigolds. They seem to deter them. And since I've been planting marigolds, I've noticed a huge difference. There normally isn't anything that I have to treat for the hornworms. There might be mild damage, but otherwise there's not really anything else that I have to do. This year, the hornworm damage got so bad, it actually did kill some tomato plants and almost killed some pepper plants. So I'm a little surprised. I guess I let it go a little too long before I treated. So for hornworms, I treat with BT. It's an enzyme that once they eat it, it messes with their digestive system and then they starve. So it's an organic way. You guys can spray to get rid of them. But my tomatoes are still recovering. Some of them are still recovering from this hornworm damage that we dealt with in August, I'd say. Peppers seem to be doing better, but I did have to cut off a lot of the pepper plant afterwards. So yeah, definitely messed with our harvest for a while there. It seems to be getting back where it used to be, but that was pretty devastating to our garden and how much we were getting off of those plants, because once they got that stress, they stopped trying to fruit. So again, does heat and weed stress have something to do with this? Probably. I don't know why this year the marigolds didn't seem to be as effective. Maybe I planted less than I did the year before. Maybe I had more tomatoes and peppers, so it wasn't as effective. They seem to be doing better now, and the hornworms are gone, and so that's really all that matters to me now. The number 1 biggest problem we had in the garden this year, the worst problem that we dealt with in the garden this year, was squash bugs, which is really shocking because we sometimes deal with squash bugs, we sometimes don't. Sort of depends. Some years we have some squash bugs, some years we have none. But normally, once I notice the squash bugs coming, if I see them coming, I go ahead and I pick them off. Normally I have to do this a couple of times. When I noticed the squash bugs coming this year, same thing, we started picking them. And we figured, oh, we'll only have to do this for maybe a week or 2, then they'll be gone. We would smush the eggs when we saw them. Every time I was down here, if I saw bugs, I'd pick them off. If I saw eggs, I'd squash them. And it kept getting worse, to the point where we started losing squash plants. Then I got a little bit more serious. I started researching what organic sprays I could use. We started with dish soap, we did neem. Everything seemed to make a little bit of a difference, but not enough of a difference. So we kept doing this, we kept picking, spraying, until we were finally down to our last squash plant in the garden. You guys have to understand, we planted a lot of squash, okay? And they just kept going from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And once they were down to the last squash plant, once that plant was on its last legs, we carefully removed the plant, put it in a garbage bag, and burned it. And so far, I haven't seen any squash bugs in the garden. I planted some new squash about a little over a month ago, I'd say. And it seems to be doing well. no signs of bugs, squash bugs. I haven't seen any squash bugs. I haven't seen any eggs. It was getting to the point where they were actually starting to get on our cucumbers, which I know isn't normal for squash bugs, but I was reading that if you run out of squash, that might be something that they'll do. So yeah, this was definitely the biggest problem in our garden this year. I have not seen that kind of devastation on a specific crop in probably not a long time. There was no, like, there's always some pests. We always lose some stuff to pests normally, but that kind of devastation was pretty hard. Losing all of our squash like that was hard because we literally just replanted a little over a month ago. We got some squash in the spring before the squash bugs took out some of that squash. But it was hard. Squash is one of our staple crops and we really like having it, and we do a lot with it, and it's great for eating, and I love having it around for the fall. I like making pineapple zucchini. So yeah, that was very, very hard to go through, and definitely our worst problem this year. If you guys have any tips for dealing with squash bugs organically, please feel free to drop them in the comments down below so I have them in my pocket for next year. But this is just an example that no matter how much experience you have, training, knowledge, we are all still learning, and we also go through struggles or problems. So it doesn't matter. I don't care if someone's posting perfect, beautiful pictures and videos. They are still dealing with challenges in their garden. They always will. There is no perfect garden. You are always going to deal with stuff in your garden, and I think that that's important to note. So hopefully this helps you, and if you've been struggling this year, please feel free to share. If you're still struggling, you need help with something, please feel free to share in the comments. We have a nice community of people here who are happy to help you, and we read and answer all of your guys' comments. So if you're struggling with something, please feel free to drop it down below. Please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with any of your gardening friends who are feeling a little discouraged this year. I know that the summer was hard, but we're getting there, guys. It is starting to cool off. I mean, I'm out here in the afternoon and I'm like, this is beautiful. And if you're new here, please don't forget to tap that subscribe button. See you guys soon.